Hello, podcast listeners. I guess I don't have to do the whole podcast.
You should. That's what people came for, Doug.
Yeah,
Give us an abridged version.
sure. Because we probably will post the recorded version later. So give me a little pause and I'll get into it. Hello, podcast listeners. You're listening to Totally Deep Cripple Creek Backcountry's Backcountry Skiing Podcast. I'm Doug Stenclik, and I'm coming to you live for our first real video stream, although I guess maybe we did it last year, with Cam Smith and Eric Poore. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And we're here
Thanks, Doug.
to,
Nice intro.
yeah, we're here to talk Grand Traverse Beta. We are about 6-7 weeks away from it, and it feels right around the corner. We decided to reprise this because Cam and I did a really fun and awesome Q&A at the race. It was 2 years ago now because you didn't race last year, right?
Right, yeah.
And I thought we covered a lot of awesome ground. People were really into it. We realized later it was way too late to make any changes to your kit because like the race was about to start in 4 hours. So it was mostly Cam telling people they were going to be all right and me telling them that they were totally screwed. So we decided we'd get here a few weeks early so you guys could ask some questions, you know, dial in your kit and see where we're going to go from here. So thanks again for coming on, guys. A little bit more introduction. Eric Poore is what's your official Dynafit title as we see the Dynafit showroom in the background behind you?
Yeah, my official title is Territory Manager. So I'm in charge of sales in the Rockies territory. So Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico.
And you are officially my tower, I guess, from a race history together. So Eric and I have raced several times together. Big races only, I guess. We've done Tellurando, we've done Grand Traverse. Never raced the Power Four, but somehow are always next to each other on Midnight Mine in the Power Four. But he is not nice enough to tell me when we're not partners, so I usually watch him fly ahead at that point. And then Cam Smith, thanks for joining us. And where are you tuning in from?
Yeah, I'm in Arras, France, a tiny little town, so hopefully I come through okay. And thanks for everyone that's doing this in the middle of the day, so I didn't have to wake up in the middle of the night. And I'm doing all the World Cup races over here, doing the whole Olympic qualification thing for skimo, and then some of the individuals and verticals while we're at it, since that's what we all love to do. And yeah, I've done the GT a bunch of times, had some success, and I'm known best as Doug's greatest adversary in races from 3 minutes to 8 hours.
Yes, exactly. We were talking about it. I have one golden photo. So when Cam makes the Olympics, the first sprint race he probably ever did, I went out way too hard. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm a good sprinter because I'm ahead of Cam right now. And then about 40 seconds later realized that wasn't sustainable even for 5 minutes.
Just in case that's unclear to anyone listening, Doug did not beat me in this race. He started it.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that's clear.
As I said, unsustainable pace for even 5 minutes. And that felt really bad. Like that 5-minute race felt as long as some nights in Richmond Ridge did when I realized I had no oxygen to the brain for the last 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So, and as we were talking about before we did the official introduction, it couldn't be any different than the Grand Traverse, what you're doing over there in Europe right now.
Yeah, I mean, the sports evolved to all ends of the spectrum, right? So, like, ski mountaineering racing, randonnée, whatever you want to call it, like, it started with things like the PDG, and then we copied it to make our own Grand Traverse. The PDG was sort of the brainchild of the GT, so it starts in Zermatt and goes to Verbier, 2 towns in Switzerland, and you do it in teams of 3 actually, because you're crossing over a glacier and you start in the night and ski over the mountains and land in a new town and thousands of people out there. And then we started the GT in, what was it, 98? Is it Jan? Someone's got to help me with Jan's last name. Where's the Nordic Center people? We're
Yeah.
gonna put that in the show notes. Doug's gonna put that in the show
Yeah, I
notes.
will. Yeah, we'll edit that in.
Yeah. But it was a woman whose name is escaping me in '98 when I was 3 years old. Started the GT of like, oh, we should have something cool like the PDG, and so that's how the sport started, right? And then someone said, oh, let's create World Cups and we'll have to make them a little shorter and faster so that they can happen in contained areas. So we were doing 90-minute individual races, and then someone said, why don't we make just a 30-minute uphill one? And then someone said, why don't we make a 3-minute one? And that was the crazy person that came up with the sprint. And then evolved into the relay, which is kind of like a longer sprint. And then those are the two that'll be in the Olympics, just for being easy to organize and television friendly and everything. So to come around to what you mentioned, Doug, yeah, it's the exact opposite of the GT. It's as short as you can go now. So we do sprints that last 3 minutes and relays that are 7 to 15 minutes. And yeah, I'm doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, just loving the sport. I like that you the vertical where there's actually no skiing involved. It's only the skinning element. That seems to be kind of your best results yet, right?
Yeah, which is a good way of saying that I'm better going uphill than downhill, at least in Europe for sure. So good backhanded compliment there, Doug. So thanks. It's a lot sexier to be good at racing downhill, and I'm better at racing uphill. So
Damage does it half of the sport.
Or you're just better at that much pain.
Yeah, just keep digging, Doug. Keep digging.
Because for me, like every time I do one of these races, when I'm on the first like uphill, I just like can't believe what I signed up for. And then usually, even if I get to ski for 5 minutes, I'm like, okay, we can probably get up the mountain again to do it. So yeah, we're here to talk about what is certainly the longest race, both mileage and time, in North America, and you know. And I guess probably the longest running too. We were trying to think because we just had the Heathen Challenge a little while ago, and that's been running a really long time too. And I don't have the exact dates, but probably right around the same time. I guess Pete Swenson started that one after seeing it raced in Europe. So I imagine the Grand Traverse has been going on a little bit longer. And I think originally the Grand Traverse started out as a Nordic ski race. With everybody on Nordic gear, and I'm sure some people used plate bindings or AT bindings at some point in the early years, but it certainly was a Nordic race because that's where the gear was at the time, and has evolved into a ski mountaineering race. And despite what anybody, especially I'm thinking Davide Giardini, would say, it is definitely a ski mountaineering race, and probably. Get out of here, Cooper.
What? I was invited.
And a little bit more than people want to say. I think especially when you're dealing with like races that happen these days, which are in the U.S. almost primarily happening within the rope lines of ski resorts. So a lot of people think, if we're only, what's the official vertical total, Cam? It's probably closer to 7,200, 7,500 vertical than whatever they say in the race manual, right?
Yeah, it depends on what kind of watch you buy. The more expensive watches usually say that you did more vertical, and the less.
Yeah, you got to pay for that extra vert.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, 7,000-ish.
Yeah.
72, 75, whatever you want to say, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe 38, 39 miles. I think probably just shy of 40 is the official total.
Yeah, it's good.
It, of course, used to start in town at the school, and that was where you got the full 40. Now it starts up at the ski resort. So you save a little bit of the cross-country ski out of town. So yeah, a bunch of changes around the years, but as I said, it's a backcountry race, and I would say even though those miles are stretched out, it is a very serious race. Skiing is very important, and especially getting down Star Pass safely. So all those rules do apply. And like you were saying, for the PDG, I was signed up last year. It of course didn't happen, but we did all the prep and the mental training for it. And even that race, it's stretched out over many, many miles, because when you're going point to point, you got to kind of take all terrain that comes. Have you done the PDG, Cam?
I have not. I always really want to do the PDG or the Mezzalama. So PDG happens on even years, Mezzalama on odd years, and they're kind of sister races, and they always happen at the end of April. And I'm always so gung-ho about it, and then April comes around, and I'm just fried and ready to come home. And the last couple of years have been injured. So I'm going to make it happen, but it's just so hard to put it together at the end of the season after racing all year.
For sure. I would also throw in, before we get into the questions here, and again, if you guys are interested, you can throw questions in the chat. It's not just the ones I'm going to read off of, and then we'll, of course, throw some frequently asked ones on there. But I have to give Eric props, because he's doing truly the bravest thing of all this year for the Grand Traverse and racing with his wife as his partner. Not that Sarah is particularly scary, but that's probably the biggest step you can take in a relationship. So I wish Eric luck, and anybody else that thought that was a good idea that's in the chat right now. But you're psyched, right, Eric?
No, it's going to be great. I say that now. Ask me in 2 months. I'll let you know if it was a good idea or not.
And I guess I should ask Cam, are you going to be back in time?
No, I'll still be over here. I wish I could race, but I'm going to miss this one, and then hopefully starting next year I'll be back in my every year GT rhythm.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think I've lost count, but yeah, maybe like 11th or 12th this year. So I don't do it every year either. This is a big one to do every year. So, of course, Pat O'Neill, he's done it every year, and he's the last remaining one who's done it every year, right?
He is, yeah, because Alan Hadley moved to New Denver, British Columbia. So, yeah, it's just Pat now.
Well, right on. Congratulations, Pat, for keeping it going all years involved. We're going to get into some of the questions. I'll just kind of take them in order that they appeared. And, again, throw them in the chat if you have some other ones. So, first question that we get a lot is best ways for water. What is the Bomber Smart Cold Weather Water System, and what is the ideal nutrition plan? So we got two questions there. Let's deal with water first. You know, I guess what I would say is there is no Bomber way to do it. It will freeze. But Cam, what do you have that's smarter than that?
You have to have it against your back. So no matter what system you come up with of, look, I'm going to use hard bottles or soft bottles around my stomach or rotate them in and out of a crampon pouch or whatever, like if it's not against your back, it's going to freeze. Like that's just going to insulate it from all the wind coming towards you. And then like think about where your clothes are most sweaty after doing a ski tour where you're wearing a backpack. Like we all have sweat on our lower backs, right? So like let's put our water there. Like that's your personal little sauna. But then the problem is you have to run the hose towards your mouth somehow, and that's where people run into issues. So the Bomber way, that's also dorky, expensive, and maybe a little bit wasteful, is you cut a hole, you wear a skin suit. That's step one. Then you cut a hole in your backpack, you cut a hole in your skin suit, you match those up. So you have someone like Mark with a Sharpie to make sure they're in the same place. And then when you get dressed, you have a really good friend or your partner run that tube through your backpack into your suit, and then it just comes up right underneath your collar and doesn't go outside at all. So the water stays up against your back, it runs like under your armpit, and then you have your water right here. And then even that isn't totally bomb-proof, because then you'll have liquid in the tube that's in front of you. So if you do all that and then either blow water back in or take a sip every 15 minutes religiously the whole race long, then I think you can get through any conditions without your water freezing. But then if you do have an issue, like if there's a kink, it's a nightmare to fix, right? Because your whole system's kind of integrated. So you definitely want to play around with it. You definitely want to make sure it works. And then, even when I do that, I notice like if I take 30 minutes between sips on accident, and then I drink and I'm like, oh, that water tastes like it's 33 degrees. Like that's about to freeze. But if you keep drinking, like the warm water from your bladder will keep coming through the tube. And then you're just like recycling the cold water with the warm water all night long. And that should keep your water from freezing. But definitely play around with it and make sure you have a layer that works, because then it's hard to put a jacket, or it's hard to change layers. If you're going to do that system right, like you need to have a jacket that can go over your backpack, or like one of those flash jackets that has the zip in the back, or just make sure that you can manage your temperature in that situation. But if you can make all that happen, then that's one bomber away. But if you're not going to do that, which is going to be most people in the race, then do whatever you can do to just keep water against your back. So like rotate soft flasks in a crampon pouch that's up against your butt, and just take them out when you're ready to drink them or whatever else, but try to limit time. Yeah, there's a good example of the jacket, but just try to limit any time that your water is away from your back.
What's the name of the jacket, Eric?
DNA wind jacket.
Yeah, Eric got me this jacket when we did it like 3 years ago. It's awesome for that because you don't have to take your backpack off. I have had some success with the soft flask rotation, like Cam was talking about, and what I would say is there is a reason why everyone's wearing spandex, and unlike cycling, it's not just because of wind resistance. It is because it's a pretty warm layer, but it's a warm layer that's designed to move heat away from your body efficiently. So I think it's probably, especially the top, it's probably one of the most mandatory things you can do. Like you could have a top and not use a jacket like this and use a real shell. In fact, for a lot of people that are planning on going over 10 hours, like I would recommend for sure not just using this. Like you can still get one of these because, as Cam said, the back is vented, or like there's a zip on it, so you can pull it over yourself when you're getting into it and leave it exposed for your backpack. But I would still recommend at that point bringing a real shell. This is kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but the spandex top especially, because you can kind of move the soft flasks around, as Cam was saying, to your back, to that warmest part where it's protected from the wind, especially when you're skiing. And you do have a really good chance to melt out the mouthpieces so that they're not freezing. So that's like one thing. And there also is a stop at the friend's hut where they will give you hot water. Again, as per the rules, you shouldn't be counting on getting a full 500 milliliters of water there, but it's specifically there that if you have to soak your hose for a second because you've already messed it up, or you have some frozen mouthpieces, like they will melt it out for you so you don't have a ice block on your back the whole time. I would also say, from racing with Eric, which was, I've had toes go black from the traverse before, but only with Eric did I have my thumb go black. And so what I would say there is, and actually Sarah gets another shout out there because I use Eric's wife's Mercury mitts, which are a really cool prop I don't have in front of me right now, but a mitt that you can pull over your gloves, and there's a hole in it where you can access to work things like your nozzle and water bottles and stuff. But I don't know what size Sarah's were, but they weren't big enough for my hands. And the way Eric races with those on is, Eric, describe it.
So it's basically, it's an insulated over mitt that allows you to have an insulated mitten and wear as a system with like a spandex race glove. So it's really nice for a race like the Traverse, where you're going to have cold temperatures. You might be above tree line, and you want to be able to make that change without taking your poles off and without stopping and having a full like transition. So it's something that just lives on your wrist, and then if your hands start to get a little bit cold, you can pull it over the top. It does a really good job of kind of rewarming everything, and ideally keeping your thumbs from going black, and making it so you can actually use your hands and actually access your soft flasks. I think what Doug was getting to in that one was he went to go squeeze a soft flask, and it was partially frozen, and the entire bottom fell out of it, so all the water fell all over him.
I panicked and I squeezed as hard as I could.
Yeah,
I could. Well, that actually wasn't what I was getting at. I pulled the Mercury mitt. So Dynafit Mercury mitt, I think it's like a mandatory piece of gear. It's a really lightweight. Do you race with them too, Cam? You're nodding your head. Is that your backup glove?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
some variation of them,
Yeah.
depending on the temperature.
So what I did is,
Correct name is the Borax over mitt, technically.
oh, sorry, borax
All
over
good.
mitt. That's what I meant. Sorry. When I pulled the four fingers over the top to get it into mitten mode, I didn't take the time to actually pull it over my thumb. And these fingers were great. Thumb froze and made eating really hard, and I was kind of too out of it to figure out why I couldn't open a wrapper. So what I would recommend is at that friend's stop, it is like a very appropriate place to take 5 or even 10 minutes. You are about to go into the real alpine. You're out of the trees for a long time at that point. So not a question on here, but the most like essential place to eat, to drink, and to change your layering, especially around your face and hands, because Start Pass is the crux in the night for sure, and keeping warm on it. So take an extra few minutes there. That's free advice. Let's go into the ideal nutrition, since that's the second part of that. This is probably a little bit different for everyone on. Cam, why don't you talk what you do at the very front of the race, and then I can talk about more what you do at the middle and the back of the race.
Yeah, I mean, first I want to preface with this is a super complicated topic, and it's going to be super individual to any person racing. Like if we have 450 racers, there's probably 450 ideal plans and probably another 450 things that are executed out there. So like we're not going to touch on everything, but we can at least give some advice on what's worked for us and some general principles. But people should work with a professional and test out what works for them to actually come up with a plan and not listen to the three of us. But that being said, when I first raced the Grand Traverse, we were around like 12 hours, and I had a lot of real foods, like things in case I got hungry, and had a lot of things that sounded really good when I was warm and dry and indoors that were terrible when I was outside. Like I had some wraps and some mixed nuts, some dark chocolate, which actually isn't the worst, but a lot of things that just once they were cold and hard and I was exercising did not sound good at all. But what I'm doing now, and more of like a 6-hour pace, is especially with high carb drink mixes now, like I can just do everything in liquid, honestly. So I can do my 3 liters of water with a scratch high carb mix, and then that's actually 600 grams of carbs or 2,400 calories in the water, and it works for me, and it goes down slowly, or it breaks down slowly because it's a really complex carbohydrate with that cluster dextrin. And then I just bring like chews or gels, and if I need a boost, like going into a difficult section, like approaching the Brush Creek aid station, I'll eat a pack of chews, and then approaching like Barnardish, I'll eat a pack of chews. So I can drink everything and just like have chews just to have something to chew on and get through the 6-hour race doing that. But once you get past around that amount of time, it's pretty difficult to make that work from a GI standpoint and just like the intensity that you're working at. So that's one way to do it, and then maybe you can give a more reasonable option, Doug.
It's funny that you mentioned the 6-hour mark there, because Cam's still, to do another slight jab at Cam, although maybe Cam's partners, it's never been broken, right? Like
right. Yeah. We were at 606 with Tom
606
in 21.
And
yeah.
The funny thing for me, from racing a ton of ski races, a ton of mountain bike races, and even some gravel races lately, 6 hours is my threshold. Where like 606 might be fine on just the drink mixes and just sugars. I had a mechanical in a gravel race that I was predicting to be done. It was a 100-mile race that I'd be done right at 6 hours, and I went like 6:20 because I was dealing with it, and my stomach just shut down right when I passed that threshold. And the Power 4 for me usually goes under 6, so it's not an issue, and you can hold together. So I really recommend people that aren't Cam and the 2 other people in North America that have a look at that 6-hour mark. Yeah, mixing in some regular food really, really helps. I've brought cold pizza before, which is probably one of those things Cam has mentioned that sounds pretty good on any given tour. Like, you're pretty psyched to bring out the piece of cold pizza if you're just backcountry skiing. It's a tough thing to get down at 3 a.m. As I would say, everything is quite tough at 3 a.m. Your body is really not used to it. I think because we are giving this advice 6 to 7 weeks ahead of the race, if you can motivate with your partner to stay up through the night or get up at 2 a.m. and practice a tour just to see how hard it is to eat, what you'll find is, like, it's alarming, but everyone else, there's, as Cam said, 450 other people going through the same thing. Nobody wants to eat. So just getting it down. I can give some things that don't work. And I think I've mentioned this before, of just putting, like, all your food in one, like, trough that you keep on top of you. That's not recommended. And you're just surprised every time you reach in and pull out a handful. I would segregate the food a little bit so you have a chance. But really what Cam's getting at with that 2,400 calorie is, that's what he's trying to get down just for 6 hours, which is optimal, like 400 calories an hour. So you can do the math. If you're trying to be out there for 10 hours, that is going to look like you're carrying something like 4,000 calories with you. If you're out there longer than that, I would say 4,000 is still probably about, like, the cap that you can realistically do. Some other things that I've found, I really can't recommend enough the Campbell's chunky noodle soup, put in the magic bullet and poured in a soft flask. I'm telling you, it just tastes like chicken broth, but it's got everything in it and it comes pre-cooked. And that's how I am. Like, I need something salty. I need something that resembles real food, because I'm not doing it in 6 hours. So, Eric, do you find anything that works?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like Cam said, nutrition is going to be pretty specific to each individual person. But finding something that works for you is only done through trial and error. So you really need to go out and practice eating while moving to know what's going to work for you in the race. A couple of things that I personally like, I always bring chocolate covered espresso beans. I think those are pretty tasty. I also think about things that aren't going to freeze. Typically, if you're bringing bars, like a normal Cliff Bar gets really, really hard when it's cold. But bars that are usually like a date base typically don't freeze quite as badly. So I'd recommend something like that that's going to be a little bit softer when it's 20 degrees out and potentially frozen. So biggest advice would be to practice whatever you think you're going to do and know that everyone's going to have a different strategy around it. But I would say eat before you think you're hungry, and eat more than you think you should be eating would be my suggestion in general around the race.
We'll take a quick write-in from John W. on here. He has, during the night section, do you recommend clear goggles instead of glasses? What do you think, Cam?
The glasses have always worked for me. If I want to have something over my eyes just for that amount of time, unless it's like a totally clear, still night. Like 2021, anyone that raced was the best conditions there's ever been, I think. I mean, I wasn't around for the first 15 years, but it was like totally clear, calm, and a full moon. And like on a night like that where there's no wind blowing, you can probably get away with just having a goggle for the downhills. But I like to have a clear lens just covering my face, just to keep my eyes from freezing, keep my corneas from getting frostbitten, and just like eyes from getting dehydrated and then having a hard time seeing. So I want to have them protected even for the uphill, if there's any kind of weather, because I think it's really easy to underestimate the total cold exposure. Like it might be the night before the race and they go up and do the racer meeting and say it could be as cold as 18 degrees and a 10-mile-an-hour wind. And someone says, oh, I ski in colder temperatures than that all the time. But when they're doing that, they're doing it on a ski area for 1 or 2 hours. They're not doing that from 11:45 when you walk outside until 10, 11 a.m. when it starts to get warm out. So like you need to think about that time multiplying your exposure too. So because of that, yeah, I like to have a clear glasses over my face too, and then goggles for the downhills as well, because you need to carry both anyway, so you might as well have them both on your head and ready. And then if you have issues with one or fogging or whatever, then you can switch. But yeah, I definitely want to have both options. And then of course, if you're racing past 8 a.m., which is pretty much everybody, then you want to have options for when the sun comes out. So all those transition lenses that are out now are great options. Like if you have something that goes fully to 0 and then up to category 3 or 4, then that's awesome. If you just don't want to splurge for one of those because those are really expensive too, then maybe have just your glasses or goggles, one is clear and one's not, and just make sure you're ready for the elements and the change in sun in that way too.
Yeah, good advice. We got some other questions about general course beta, which we're going to get in the weeds on that, so we'll save that for last. But this is a smaller topic on it, and it was, can you give the first timer an idea of how steep and or technical the skin tracks are, or if there's any sections that you want to burl your skins on? There was some weird advice on this, like when I first got into the sport, which a lot of people were using very shortcut skins for the first climbs the first bit after Crespi Mountain Resort, and you would use those to like maybe friends and then switch to something different. But now just a regular cut Pomoka skin, like we were talking about earlier, maybe cut 6 to 8 inches behind the tails, should get you through just about anything. And I don't think there's any advantage to having thinner skins, and I've changed my tune on this quite a bit. 62s would be fine, but I don't think you have to mess with anything narrower than 60. What do you think, Cam?
That's another one where like maybe what I'm doing isn't the best advice for everyone to follow. So I like to do a narrower skin of 55, actually, what was the Pomoka Celeranda and now is the Glide. Because with a narrow enough ski, you can still make it up Star Pass, no problem with that, with good technique, as long as the conditions are right. And then a narrower skin is just going to give you that much more glide and be that much lighter. So it sort of, the pendulum swung back. Like people thought that it was all about the length of the skin and like, oh, I'll use a really short skin for this flatter section. But really what's important is what's under your foot, right? And if a really short skin is 62 millimeters wide, then that's the part that's under your foot. Like that's what's dragging, that's what's gripping, and a shorter skin is just more prone to fail. So I don't really think anyone should ever use a skin that's not more than an inch or two past their heel piece in length, and then you can play around with the width. So what I would recommend for a first timer is just get like a high quality skin in a 60 or 62 width and wax it well, and just put it on and don't think about it again. And then if someone has done a few years of the GT and they're trying to shave a little time off and they feel really good about their technique and they want to speed up on some of those flatter sections, then maybe you can mess around with the 59s and then all the way down to the 55s. But past that, I wouldn't really go any more narrow either.
That's what I was saying, is I think I have tried like a straight up like 45 before, and that was too narrow, so don't do that. It's just not worth the extra glide is not worth like breaking your rhythm and sliding backwards. So I would say always err on the side of more grip than trying to cut the corners. So all your steep parts, there was one place that we used to skin up, but now just outside the resort is almost always a boot pack. So you don't really have to worry about any of this stuff approaching Star Pass. I have had years, I'm trying to think how long, it was probably before Cam was really doing it. I have had years where it's pretty hard to skin up Star Pass at all. If we hit a full isothermic snowpack with bad winds leading into the event, I've seen it where we boot up like the steepest pitches of Star Pass. So, if the snow was that wind messed up, like that is an option. It's not a long boot pack, and once you're back on the ridge, you have skins on. So just make sure you have a full skin for that. And if you are gonna mess around with having like a 62 and a 55, which, as Cam said, might not be a bad idea. I would save the 55s until after Star Pass is over, and there shouldn't be any issues from the bonfire, Geo's bonfire, to the end with using a thinner skin.
Totally. And I think an important thing to keep in mind too for like your first or second race is you can save seconds with playing around with these details, right? Of shaving a few millimeters of width and cutting them a little shorter and saving what, like 10 grams, like the weight of a coin, right? You can save seconds doing that, and you can lose minutes by blowing a skin and having to get that old one out of your bag and messing around with this wet one, and oh, it's actually not getting on. Can you grab this one for me? Or like, oh, I need to warm it up, or whatever you got to do. Like, you can save seconds but lose minutes. So like a really reliable skin with good glue, that's well waxed and works for your ski and everything is just going to be a better option.
Yeah, one thing I would add into that is when you leave Crested Butte Mountain Resort and you start doing the long traverse, I think it's Brush Creek, if I'm not mistaken. You basically, unless something has changed in the race, you're not, those skins that you have on your skis aren't going to come off those skis until you get to the top of Star Pass. So that's a really, really long period of time to be using a single pair of skins. I definitely recommend when you get to Friend's Hut, it's worth like taking a second to see how your skins are doing and before you get above tree line, especially if you're newer to the race and not sure how you're going to be feeling or how your skins are going to be doing at that point. If it's been super sugary in the skin track, you might have some snow creep coming in on the tails. Tails might be coming off. It's worth taking the extra moment at Friend's Hut to make sure your skins are good before you get above tree line, when it might be windy and cold and more technical when it comes to the actual skinning that you're doing. So just keep that in mind. It's definitely worth taking the extra time there.
Cool. Easy, quick question I have on here is it required to wear a helmet the entire traverse or only on downhill sections? And I would say it's required to wear it the whole time. And it's not something you're really going to want to mess with. So to expand on just general strategy, it doesn't seem like a big deal to have slower transitions and to be putting jackets on and off, but all of it, and helmets on and off, all of that does stop you and slow you down and cause kind of rapid changes to temperature. And that'll actually add up to even hours over the course of the night. So trying to use your pacing as temperature regulation is like pretty important. So if you start getting really cold, maybe even instead of going straight for the jacket, just try to increase your pace a little bit and get that body temperature up. And then if you start feeling like you're sweating, maybe slow it down a little bit. And the less stopping, the better. And I would say the helmets fall into that too. It's even if it were in the rules, like you want to get a helmet. It's the TLT helmet from Dynafit, Eric.
Correct.
That one's a good one because you can actually use it for rock climbing and even biking and just general skiing. There's the DNA helmet is the racier one, but that one you're really getting just for racing. But any option like that, it's going to have a way to run it without ear flaps, so you can just have like a really light buff on underneath, and they're light enough that you don't think about it. Cam, do you always train with helmets on, like even when you're out doing workouts because you're going to be racing with it?
Yeah, and they're just like light and comfortable enough that I just don't really think about it anymore. Like I wear it for every ski. Not even a question anymore.
Cool. We're looking for the perfect light glove, which we talked about earlier. I actually do think for this race, because I kept accidentally plugging it when I was trying to talk about the borax mitt. I actually do think the mercury glove with wind mitt is a perfect product for this race. That's not what I use for like the Power 4 necessarily. Because generally, if you look at some of the camp like race specific gloves that have like insulated mitts you pull over, they're too cold for a race like this. Again, Cam can probably get away with something totally non-insulated, but the mercury mitt does have a little Primaloft in it, and you can still manipulate whatever you need to on it, and it has the added wind mitt. So I think that's a perfect one for anyone that's not Cam. Cam, do you get away with like a DNA glove like a race glove to start the race?
I would if it was warm, but normally I would just wear the glove you're describing.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, check that one out. It's awesome for it. But I would say any glove you look at, don't go as light as you would in any other training or race day. Like wear a warm glove. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah, I would add having breathability in your gloves as well, because you don't want something that's super warm and waterproof necessarily, because that's just going to lead to more sweat. But the ability to really customize your system. So with the mercury mitt or mercury glove, it has a kind of a shell that comes over your hand as a mitten, which does trap a lot of heat and also blocks wind. So whether it's a singular glove like the mercury glove or a spandex glove paired with an insulated over mitt, having some very customizable system that you can use to kind of adjust your hand temperature is really important. And being able to do that without stopping is even more important.
Yeah. We're moving on to some course questions specifically now. This one's, how difficult would you rate navigating during the race? And basically, do you have to spend a lot of time making sure you're going left or right? What I would say about this one is almost certainly you are just following the headlamp in front of you, and they have nice blinking strobes to follow. So generally, this is not an issue. I actually don't know. I've been nervous in very windy races before when the wind's really blowing that I couldn't see the next wand, because visibility can shrink down pretty quick, but I've never had to pull out any kind of navigation, and you can follow the skin track in front of you, usually if there's blowing wind. That being said, in the Gothic Mountain Tour, which is one of the warm-up events, I have been pretty close to really doing the wrong thing in that race. So you really do have to be prepared for anything. And that race happens almost entirely during the daylight, but the top of the world there, when the wind is fully blowing the snow sideways, you are not going to see the tracks in front of you, and going the wrong direction off that will definitely give you a poor result in the race and could be much, much worse. So I would say if the conditions do change that drastically, it's worth really getting your bearings before taking a guess, because you don't want to go the wrong way. Mm-hmm. If you're breaking trail and you're not Cam, think about reversing course.
Thank you. Yeah, the team that's out there does such a phenomenal job marking this thing, but as phenomenal as they are at that job, the task ahead of them is so massive that it's just, they can't have flags every 15 feet for 40 miles in the backcountry, in the middle of nowhere when the wind's blowing in the night. So there are stretches where you can't see that next marker very well, but really the only time navigation is ever an issue is if wind is in play. So if you're expecting any kind of wind, which is probably 9 years out of 10, and you should always count on the wind being more than it's forecasted, then at this point, everyone should have some kind of technology to mark with. So like hopefully one of the two partners has like a modern high-tech watch that you can get the map on, or have your phone accessible, but there's really no excuse not to have between the two phones and the two watches that every team will have. Like the map has to be on one of those, and just have that ready for if it's windy. But really, I wouldn't be worried at all unless it's a mega windstorm.
I guess what I would point out, because the question was specific, is it normal just to follow the headlamp in front of you? I could argue if I was the one leading everyone off course, or if I was being led off course, but I have had years even just out of the resort where you hit one of the barbed wire fence lines and someone just starts following it. And so if you are just head down blindly following, you can get led astray. So you should try to keep your bearings even if someone's right in front of you, because they might make a wrong turn. That wasn't like a big deal. That was just like going up a couple 100 feet and then realizing this is not the course. It's just a bummer when you're dealing with even a 2-minute navigation error and you're only 1 hour into a many hour race. So keep your wits above you.
Yeah. The team in first that year is 2019, and you can see it on all the Strava maps. But whoever was in first that year at that time, just couldn't find the next marker and kept going higher and higher and led 300 people off the course and gave them all a little extra. So
Yeah.
whoever that is, shame on them. But yeah, don't just follow the person ahead of you, assuming they know where they're going.
Here's a question about cutoffs. We've had a couple cutoff questions. So someone was asking about the 3 mile an hour goal, which I guess if you think about it, that'd be 12 hours, right? So
13.
13.
Yeah.
So and they were asking if you need to be on that 3 mile an hour goal to make the start cutoff. And I would say probably not, because that is where you're getting most of the elevation. It definitely happens well inside of the first half of the race as mileage goes. But start pass, I do find to be, is it even for you right about the middle mark, Cam? Time-wise anyways?
Yeah, that's a pretty good estimate. If like the race goes super smooth, it might be a little less than halfway, but I think everyone should count on when you get to start pass, just double your time, and that's a good way to guess.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think 3 miles an hour will get you where you're going. So that's a super solid goal that will give you some good buffer. Let's see, there was another one on that one.
And that's a good plug for the Gothic Mountain Tour while you're looking, Doug.
Yeah.
A lot of times the cutoffs are harder to hit in Gothic than they are in the Grand Traverse. So I'm not sure if it's full yet. If it is and you were on the fence, then that's a bummer. But for everyone that's signed up for Gothic, if you can hit those cutoffs, you should feel good about your odds for the GT itself.
Yeah, so there was another question about how much variance can there be between that cutoff. And that is a good question. There can be some variance based on weather concerns. So, they're trying to get everybody safely to Aspen. And one of the ways to do that is they have in the past moved cutoff times around. And it's a really good time to point out that it is a very make or break situation to ski over the top of Star Pass. So you should feel very strongly about finishing if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a bummer to try to get out from the other side. On reverse years, I did one time have to DNF, and I had made it around friends, so I made it up to Star. And what I will say is getting out back the other side is much less committing. It's almost entirely
Mm-hmm.
downhill. We did it last year. There is some skating and some sidestepping, like to get around Death Pass if you're coming out that way, but it's very much net downhill and a pretty quick out going over. You should do if you're feeling confident, but again, they're putting in a pretty generous, or a pretty, I guess not generous, a pretty aggressive cutoff to Star Pass. So if you're within that, you're looking good for the rest of the race. But if there's health conditions or exposure you're dealing with, then it's a good time to enjoy the night and turn around. The ride is much easier out from that side. Moving on to, let's see, before we totally launch into it, which one are you looking at? What size? Oh yeah, what size backpack? This is good. I brought a Dynafit Speed 25 plus 3 as a prop here. I would say this is a very strong pack choice. So, Eric, what are the specs? We call it a 28 liter then? Where does the 3 come from? The crampon pocket?
No, the 3 comes from a clamshell, so it expands out. So you can make that a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
It's 25 when it's fully zipped up, and then plus 3 when it's fully expanded.
And what I'll say about it too is it has actual shoulder straps with like a little bit of padding more than a race pack. And this one's like stuff for display purposes, but it's still really, really light even with the stuffing in it. It does have the crampon pocket that we're talking about there, which is like really important for like your burliest gloves, cycling through your hydration. Most all the race packs will have that. I think this is the sweet spot. You're going to see the front guys in the race in a much smaller pack. It's really dicey to go smaller than a 25 liter pack, I think, because you can only do that if you have the very lightest gear in every category, which means like your down jacket is not going to be very warm. You're only using that DNA like race wind shell for the wind shell requirement. You're using the smallest Leatherman squirt tool I stole from Cam last year. So like that's the only way to get in a pack smaller than that. And then even still, you should expect your pack to be 10 pounds. And that's going to be a bummer if you're out there for 12 hours with the little spaghetti straps pulling at you. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't sweat going any smaller than the speed pack. So I didn't have one until last year, but now that I have one of those, it's just so comfortable, and having the zipper on that crampon pouch is so nice that the next time I do the GT, I'm just going to use that speed pack that you were just modeling, and it's a good goal to be able to fit everything into that. Like if you're forced to get all the right gear to be able to make that all fit and practice your packing ahead of time, then I think that's a good goal for a big part of the race, is to use that like 25 to 30 liter type of pack. So it might not be that one in particular, but I think 25 to 30 is a good goal.
And Aaron is asking because they have exactly this pack and is worried about getting everything into it. And again, to get in something like this size, you do need a pretty small sleeping pad. Camp used to make one specifically for racing, but Thermarest would make a really light inflatable only sleeping pad that goes in there, and your stove choice does matter if you're doing that. So I'd say if you're stressed, err on the side of going bigger, especially again if you're over the 10-hour mark. 35 liter pack is totally there, because the bigger the pack, the better the hip belt, the better the shoulder straps, the better it'll carry weight. So pack it up, don't be afraid. I would always say it's going to be cheaper to get an extra pack that maybe is a little bit bigger than your uphill pack or your normal race pack than it is to get the lightest stove out there, the lightest sleeping pad, the lightest jackets, the lightest pants. So don't be afraid. That is, I would say the pack is the last place to really cut grams. That being said, I wouldn't use like a BCA stash 40 liter. There are packs that would be, if they're not built with any lightness in mind and you're starting out with a 6-pound backpack before you even leave, that'd be an easy way to save, but don't skimp between the 25 and the 35 liters.
I would also say just the lightest pack you feel is comfortable as well. Like comfort is really, really important in this race. If you're out there for 10, 12, 13, 14 hours, it's a long time to have something on your back. So having a little bit bigger pack that gives you a better suspension system and more padding is going to pay dividends, in my opinion. So definitely having something that's comfortable.
I got some boot fitting questions here. This is obviously probably the biggest crux, and from what I hear from the Nordic Center and the race directors, this is probably the biggest reason for DNFs, or at least really sad time, are blisters, and epically awful blisters. So how are you looking for it to fit compared to a more free touring boot? I would say there's a little less in the lightweight boots to immobilizing your heel, so making sure you have a way to lock your heel and not get those blisters is important. Leaving a little extra toe room is fine, because you're not looking for the ski performance you would out of your 4-buckle crossover boot. So don't be afraid to upsize. It's way easier to deal with that in that. You don't want to have more than 2 fingers behind your heel, but 2 fingers behind the heel for this would be good. You got to kind of talk to a boot fitter about tricks to keep that heel down, but there's some foam buildups you can do, especially over the top of your foot, that'll keep that heel locked down. And I would say everybody here has a ton of time. If you're on this chat right now, keep training. You're in good shape. And remember, most of the training you're doing is to toughen your feet. So if you do that, everybody can walk on skis a really long time. Any other tricks for that, boys?
I mean, just time in your boots, honestly, to understand. So you're not surprised when you get out there. If you've been putting the time in, whether that's on steep terrain or flat terrain. I think that's another good point, is skinning on flat versus skinning up a steep ski area is different on your feet. So you want to make sure that you're spending time on more rolling terrain instead of just going up and down a groomer at the ski area. Because a lot of the traverse is traversing. So you want to make sure you're spending time on that flat terrain as well to really toughen up your feet.
Someone did ask about the 10-pound quote there, with 100 ounces of water. So that is 6 of your 10 pounds. Is that realistic? I think if you're planning 20, that's fine. I would get your pack under 20. That shouldn't be hard to do at all. I'm always amazed because I've had a career fitting people in backpacks, and people were like, oh yeah, I carry like 50-pound packs backpacking, and I would put like 23 pounds in their backpack. And when they're judging fit, I was like, does that feel like right? Is that about the weight you carry? And like, yeah, that's about the weight I carry. It's like not even close. 20 pounds is like a very heavy pack. You should definitely get it lighter than that. I don't think like 10 pounds is aggressive, but what I'm saying is even the most aggressive people in the smallest packs should still figure on 10 being on the light side. And if you think about that compared to what you race the Power 4 in, 10 pounds would feel very heavy in that.
Yeah, compared to a normal like skimo race, your pack's going to feel heavy.
Yeah, even compared to a backcountry ski pack, I find, because like you rarely carry 6 pounds of water backcountry skiing. So yeah, I would say most people rarely tour with a pack over like 12 pounds, even in the backcountry. So it's going to feel heavy. 20 pounds, you gotta buy some gear. 10 pounds is pretty aggressive, so maybe in that 12 to 15 is more realistic.
Yeah, I've never weighed mine, but I would think that 10 would be pretty hard to make happen with 6.6 pounds of water, based on the requirement. So I don't think anyone's actually getting 10, but I've never weighed mine. But I do every year. I pack everything up, and I feel pretty proud of myself for whittling everything down as far as I can while still being safe. And then I add the water in, and all of a sudden it feels massive. Yeah, so it's going to be heavy even if you have the lightest everything because of the water. So.
It should give you a good goal to drink a bunch of your water in that first hour or two of the race, because it's nice to pee that out before start pass.
Totally.
Let's see. I guess, should we get into course beta? Anything else on gear? Anybody? Oh, I moved the screen for some reason. Anybody have any other gear questions before we launch into the endless debate of Richmond Ridge? Cool. Okay, well, on to skating versus skinning in general. As Cam knows now, the fastest way to get up Crested Mountain Resort is definitely skating. So everybody should skate.
If you're an Olympian, go for it. But Olympic Nordic skier, not an Olympic skimo racer. If you are an Olympic Nordic skier, have fun.
Yeah.
But other than that, chill out.
There was one year where Simi Hamilton and Ben Coons lined up with no skins on in their skis, and like we're out of sight. What would you say, like 7 minutes into the race?
Totally, yeah.
So it turns out that year, at least, skating still wasn't the way, although Simi is still confident he could be near the 4-hour mark in the perfect skating conditions, which I think he could, and then you just got to find someone crazy enough to try it. Maybe you, Cam, one year. I don't know how you feel about your skating.
No, I'm still completely convinced that the GT record is going to get lowered by a lot. It's going to stay over 5 hours, and it's going to be done by two people that are really good at skating using skimo skis. Because there's just, with the changes in aspect and elevation, you're never going to get a crust across the whole course. And it's so much more efficient on downhills, even though like people like Simi are so good at skiing Nordic skis down any kind of snow. Like it's still just so much harder on your body. And then same thing with the skinning of it's just so much less stable, even for people that are freaks with it.
Yeah, it turns out skating on skimo gear is very efficient too.
Totally, especially if it's not groomed, right? So yeah, like Simi thinks differently, but I think it's going to happen with someone like Simi skating a bunch, using their skimo skis, and then
I-
taking advantage of the downhills and
We
stability.
did have a question that I've never gotten on gear and on this conundrum, and someone asked, can you mount skimo bindings and use skimo boots on a Nordic ski? Or no, they asked the opposite. So the answer to my question that I just posed, I think that's a great idea. It could be a way to save a few $100 off a Dynafit race ski, is if you have a metal edge wider touring ski laying around, you could just buy the race binding and the race boot. That's like a really interesting way to go. And if it has scales, you could have a chance to kick and glide. Although, as we talked about, you'd have to have a pretty soft snow year for that to be realistic, because if it's wind-blown ice like it is on most ridge lines, you're going to need skins on anyways. But those are, those skis retail for $350, and you can probably find some at your used gear shop. And that would be a really clever way to go to put skimo race bindings and boots on that. Someone asked for the opposite thing, though. They wanted to mount Nordic bindings and boots to a skimo ski, and I've never gotten that question. I guess you could, but as we talked about, it's pretty dicey. You really want to be able to lock your heel down on coming down those passes, but certainly easier than just doing it in an old skate gear, which does get done by a couple people every year. So I would say the first scenario makes more sense than the second, right, Cam?
Yeah, but I'm honestly not really thinking about either one. Like, I'm gonna use skimo skis, skimo bindings, skimo boots, and then skate the sections that I need to skate and enjoy having my bindings be reliably attached to everything and everything be nice and stable and comfy. And I'm not gonna change from that personally.
Yeah.
Cam, when you're skating on your ski mode setup, are you heel free, heel locked in, boots in ski mode, boots in walk mode? What's your preference?
I'm double locked, so it's the same as downhill skiing. And I know people that are really proficient skate skiers that have different strategies, and so people should try out what works for them. But for me, I just keep everything locked, and that feels good for me.
I got a easy question here from Michael Warner from our Seattle shop. What bindings are not allowed? And it's all the bindings Warner would use. So any Karakoram, Spark, or any split board binding, definitely not allowed. Any other binding allowed. So like, you can use Nordic bindings, but then they make you carry a spare binding and spare screws, because even Olympians like Ben Coons that we've seen do it have often broken their skis and bindings in this race. So I think that was Cam's point about using a metal edge touring ski, is if you've already paid the entry fee and gotten the rest of the gear, it's just a bummer to have to duct tape tree branches to your ski to just claw across the line. So no split border has ever been anywhere close to any skimo race, power of two or otherwise. Yeah, and I've thought about it. As Warner knows, I've also dabbled in split boarding, and I was like, man, that would be pretty cool, just because like it pissed me off when I was a snowboarder going to Deer Valley and they said I couldn't do it there, and I was like, well, maybe I should give the middle finger to the race directors and sneak into the race. But it would be so dumb to do it, because the only time you would ever put your board together would be to come down Aspen Mountain at the end. That would just be like an awful way to spend 15 hours. So yeah, don't do that. Don't sneak into the race.
Yeah. And there's
so
awesome athletes that split board that could totally do it.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people out there that could totally do it, but it doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, it just makes more sense to, if you're going to split ski the whole thing, you should just do it on skis, because it is a cross-country race. So, so course beta, let's get into it, and then we'll wrap it up here. Unless you're an Olympian, everybody's skinning, and it's pretty pleasant. It should be we'll just walk you through step by step. So gun goes off at midnight. If you're racing with Elliot Bates, he will try to break your poles every year. So that's my first piece of beta is don't race with Elliot. And if you do, keep your poles very high. There's a lot of nervous energy in the start. And if you break a pole there, which I've never done with Eric, I waited at least another 20 minutes before I broke my pole. Yeah, breaking poles sucks. Don't break your pole. Keep your poles high. And you're all skinning. And what I mean is that's a celebration of the sport. You're with 400 plus like-minded people in the dark. Everyone's stoked. You should not be redlining at all. You should be super comfortable at talking pace. There's no reason to go any faster. The next piece of beta is when you pull skins from the top, you got a little bit of a skate. Also, don't stay super controlled on that downhill. Also, not a relevant part of the race, how fast you can tuck a groomer. I think Eric and I, we were in first then, though, weren't we? Cam started late.
Oh yeah, we were in first. Yeah, because
Yeah.
Cam was behind us, and we're like, "What the heck are we doing up here?"
Yeah.
I think that was
2021,
Yeah,
we could
21.
there's a window that you could start within
Yeah, because it
to
was the
spread
COVID
this
year.
all out. Yeah.
I think Doug and I looked at each other and we said, "We shouldn't be up here. This isn't good."
And I was about to get lost coming down the groomer that I've been down
Yeah.
10 times. So that means you're skiing too fast. So, okay, you're there. Really quick piece of beta. When you're leaving the resort, you kind of get funneled across like a little snow bridge. And that's a really good time. So there's a few blind rollovers that are scary even in the Gothic Mountain Tour when it's daylight. It'll catch you off guard by headlamp. With hundreds of headlamps around, it'll really catch you off guard. So check speed on those rollers. But also when you get funneled across the bridge leaving the resort, there's been years where that's all breakable crust. And so if you have to like go around someone, like you could break your ski or your leg right there. And it's just really not that relevant. If it is a good skate year, meaning that crust is supportable, you are skating as soon as you leave the resort. And the fast teams will get to a steep hill where what do they call it? What's the sage thing? The endless sage, the sea of sage.
The sage.
Yeah, so it's a little hectic because there are sage bushes usually sticking up everywhere. But the top teams will all sidestep the first hill there. So if you're good, sidestep. It's always far harder than you think to sidestep when you're redlining, and that's where I broke my pole racing with Eric. So wish I wouldn't have done that. But once you're up to the top of that, it is a skate for about how many miles?
Gosh, I don't know the timing, but that would take you all the way around the corner to Ambush Ranch and then West Brush Creek and Middle Brush Creek. And then at Middle Brush Creek, which is the second major creek crossing of that drainage, and when if you're looking at a map, it's where you can turn off towards Pearl Pass. That's where no matter what, everyone should have skins on at that point. So
Yeah.
and
what I will,
if you're able to skate in any of those sections, then that's great, but it is super energy costly unless you're super efficient with it and the conditions are perfect. So skin up if you need to, but then by the time you're at Middle Brush, everyone should be on skins.
And what I'll say is I usually skate it just because you're going to spend so much time on your skins that it's nice to work different muscles. But there were years, I remember a year that John Gaston and Max Tom did it together, and they were like blown. Did you race them that year, or were you not there that year?
No, I was I was not quite around.
Yeah.
Well, I was sort of around. I wasn't fast.
So they were amazed that like 3 or 4 teams were well out in front of them because they were skinning that. They just didn't have the beta. They still won the race though. And Brad and Nikki La Rochelle have definitely not skated as much as me, and I put in a pretty good gap to them, and they still beat me plenty of times. So it's not a make or break. None of the beta we're about to give you about when to skate is a make or break part. And I would say if you're worried about making the cutoffs, you should definitely skin because, as Cam said, it's way more energy conserving. So if you're motivated, skate at least till that Ambush Ranch zone. And then, and if you're not an Olympian, you're definitely skinning from there.
Yeah, Doug, I just pulled up the mileage checkpoints in the racer manual.
Yeah.
But yeah, from the East River checkpoint, that starts at mile 4, and then to Ambush Ranch is going to be 3.25 miles of potentially skating or a combination of the two. So Ambush Ranch is at mile 7.25.
Yeah. So from there, everybody's skinning up Star Pass. Even if you're doing on Nordic gear, you are skiing. I guess Star Pass, if it's windy, you just got to be pretty aware to not drop off right early, because that would end your race, and you also don't want to lose a ski there. And then when you're dropping to the left into the actual Star Pass bowl that we ski, that can be really fun skiing. Some years are really heinous. Other years, nobody will know until the day of. And then you eventually get down to Geode's Bonfire, and that is skins back on for pretty much everyone, right, Cam?
Yeah, and to interject a bit, Doug, I think no matter how good of a job we describe some of those, like go a little left here, go a little right there, no one's going to remember that by the middle of the night, but they will cover a lot of this in the pre-race meeting the day before.
Mm-hmm.
So what I really want people to take out of this conversation right now is more some of those themes about like conserving energy and pacing and like how you're working towards some of those cutoffs. So to backtrack a little bit, that whole climb up to Star, like that's a big bulk of the climbing of the race. So that's where like you and your partner need to be pacing right. You need to be eating and drinking. You need to be making sure you're taking care of yourselves. You get over Star, yeah, and then to pick back up at Geo's Bonfire, now you're going to Aspen at that point.
Yeah.
So continuing on, like just to sort of know what to train for and expect from Geo's Bonfire, which is the bottom of the Star Pass descent, which is 1,000 feet, 1,200 feet of any kind of high alpine north-facing snow conditions you can find in the end of March or beginning of April. So it could be nice powder, it could be breakable crust, it could be anything in between. But that descent is maybe 30-ish degrees, just to give people kind of an idea. It would be like a blue square slope on a ski area, but it's going to be natural snow conditions. So that's like the bulk of the backcountry skiing. And then Geo's Bonfire all the way across Taylor Flats, this is going to be really flat skinning. So this is where people start to develop foot issues, where people start to get cold hands because they're not working hard enough. So just kind of keep that in mind.
It's a
surprisingly
cold part of the race there. So a lot of people think once you're off Star Pass that the cold's behind you. But all the top racers that I've been around are pretty hypothermic by the time they get to the next high point, which is what Cam's about to talk about.
Totally. Yeah, and then you should be studying these kind of like course profile considerations now, but you'll get a lot of those details of watch out for the snow here, watch out for this turn there the day before the race if it's your first GT. But then you'll have what we call the 3 camel humps. So those are going to be some steep skins and some short skis down. I rip skins there, but I know people that keep their skins on and don't lose too much time one way or another. So think about if you're comfortable with your transitions or comfortable with down skinning and kind of weigh all that in that way. But again, just to sort of know what to expect, you're going to have a few steep climbs, some short descents, and you'll get to Barnard, which is then another significant part of the race, because from Barnard to the top of the sun deck is what we call Richmond Ridge, which is the most difficult part of the race for pretty much anyone because of where it comes and because of the difficulty of tackling that part of the course, because it's not really straightforward if you'd be skinning, skiing, or skating. So the 3 of us were talking about earlier is that we've all had perfect plans of how we're going to handle every little twist and turn of that thing, and it's never worked out in the night. So if someone can get ahead of that and like put waypoints on their watch or something and can figure it out, then make sure you share that information with the rest of the world. But the one thing that I would say, and what the 3 of us I think are in agreement on, is from Barnard, there's a really short little climb. Like you can see the tree 100 yards away. If you can just get up to that point, you're going to have a long down, short flat section and down. This is going to be over like a mile and a half. So ideally you're going into Barnard with your skins off. You're getting that short little climb done somehow, whether you walk, sidestep, skate, whatever. Then you're gonna have a long, speedy section. So hopefully your skins are off there. The first time you start to go uphill, that climb is the biggest climb of Richmond Ridge, and you're gonna put skins on. And then from there, it's anything goes. So maybe Eric, you have some advice from that point that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, I think just to what Cam said, yeah, leaving Barnard, you can usually skate and then ski down. First climb, skins on. And then after that, it really is kind of dealer's choice. There's no like right or wrong answer. My usual suggestion is not to second guess your decision and just keep going. Even that means, so you've chosen to skate and you get to a point where like, oh, this is a steep section. I can't really skate this. It's better to take your skis off and like walk up that short little bit than do a full transition and put skins on. So it's definitely better just to kind of pick one and stick with it instead of constantly second guessing your decision out there. Just from a mileage standpoint, I'm sure a lot of people on the call that like to look at metrics. From Barnard to the top of the sun deck is just over 7 miles. So you are going to have a fairly long distance to go on Richmond Ridge. I would also highly recommend looking at the racer manual that's on the GT event page, because that does give you some really good mileage metrics so that you kind of know where you are and can kind of know exactly what you have left if you're motivated by those types of things as well. So
yeah, and then that gets you to the sun deck. Like Eric said earlier, he turned around when I was close to the sun deck and saw me just not even like shouldering my skis or carrying them in my hand, but like just dragging them by the tips. Things can get pretty low there, even for an experienced racer. So don't stop eating when you're past Barnard. For most of us, like on bad years, that'll take me over 2 hours to get in from there. So that means that's at least 4 other opportunities to eat. And the ski down Ajax, it's very straightforward. It probably won't have as much flagging as you wish it would, but you're just kind of staying in the gut of Aspen Mountain all the way down. It's a steep blue run. Definitely would be hard to do on Nordic gear, but if you have your race gear and you're out training, like you're going to be good there. And welcome to Aspen.
Mm-hmm.
We're a little over on the call, so I'll probably end it there. But Cam, thanks for making the time. I know it's probably way past your bedtime in Europe. If you do have more questions, feel free to write info@cripplecreekbc.com, and we can keep answering them as we go. But thanks Cam Smith, and thanks Eric Poore for making the time today, and thank you all for registering, supporting Cripple Creek Backcountry, Dynafit, and CB Nordic, and we will see you in March.
Thanks, Doug.
Well said. Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Doug.
And good luck out there, and stay safe, especially you, Cam. Let's see you in the Olympics in a couple.
I'm trying.